Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the Dark Crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone. This is your vital essence on all things the Dark Crystal. I'm your host, Philip Mitchell. Just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. And with me, of course, is my co-host, Jaime Prater. So, Jaime, thank you for being on the show.
As always, thank you so much for having me. Love the show. Love where we are at as far as being fans of the Dark Crystal. It's a great time to be alive.
Definitely, yeah. With so much that's going to happen this year, it is going to be an incredible year. No doubt about it. So on this episode, I thought, we'd do a conversation about the prequel dilemma. That sort of, I guess in a way just concerns that, we might have about the show and just sort of, I guess, with, being a prequel story, and I think the expectations, I guess, that we have in mind for the show, and what if it doesn't deliver, and what if it's not great, or what if it's awesome, or all that kind of stuff. And I think this was sort of your suggestion, Jaime, to do an episode about all this. So I might actually just start off with you. Just what you wanted to start off with, with this whole conversation about the prequel dilemma with the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance.
For sure. So, again, I was talking to Philip a couple days ago, and just about prequels and the dangers of prequels. And it's a prequel dilemma. We've seen, obviously there's the Star Wars. George Lucas began the whole prequel dive with the, episode 1, 2, and 3. And they were very divisive, and they weren't exactly successful. I mean, they were successful for sure, but not in the way. I mean, each film made less money than the one, like the Phantom Menace made a ton of money, and then Attack of the Clones didn't make as much. But there's inherent dangers, and I believe in being cautious. I believe in being also being cautiously optimistic. We haven't really seen much from Age of Resistance. What we have seen, of course, the big reveal were the 3 Gelfling puppets, which I think are fantastic. I always have to stop myself from cursing because this is a family show. Yeah, they were fantastic. But and we discussed in an episode prior, the voice cast and some of the people that they chose, like Keegan-Michael Key and Harvey Fierstein and Andy Samberg. Not that those people aren't amazing, talented, funny people. They are, but they're known as comedians, or more, they play in more comedic roles. So I was having just some thoughts, like there's some, there are decisions that are made, sometimes when prequels are made. Well, first of all, like for instance, I am the host and showrunner of Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and we've just, we received 2 prequel films in the past 5 years, which was Prometheus and then Alien Covenant, and they were very divisive among the fans. They weren't very successful either in terms of their profits and how successful they were in fandom. Very, very divisive and explosive. It's hard to even talk about them. People really don't talk about them because they're so divisive. But I think I hold the Dark Crystal much like you do, and all of the fans of the Dark Crystal. We hold it in really high regard. It's like the Holy Grail. It's the Ark of the Covenant. Really, the Dark Crystal original film is the Ark of the Covenant in terms of skill and magic and wonder and puppetry and everything that that I don't have to explain. But I am a little bit afraid that I'm not afraid. I'm a little concerned that in some of the characters we're going to get some kind of hipster meta gelfling referencing modern culture, winking at us a little bit and not really staying immersed in this world. And writers and directors have a hard time not doing that. They have a hard time. And that's some of the criticism that The Last Jedi had, whereas that scene where Poe was in a ship and he's in front of the Juggernaut and he was like, I got a message for Hux. And he's like something about his mother. And it was just dumb. It was dumb. It pulled me right out of the movie. It didn't seem like a galaxy far, far away in its own. It just felt kind of modern, hipster, funny. And I didn't like it, and it didn't work. And I'm a little bit concerned that we might see that in Age of Resistance.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. And I think, with the whole sort of prequel dilemma, thinking about what you talked about, and with the Star Wars prequels, for example, with episodes 1, 2, and 3, I know, for me, I sort of enjoy them for what they are. I sort of got to a point where I actually appreciate them for some extent, but I know for a lot of fans that it didn't work for them, and I can understand that. Especially with the expectations that if you're going from Return of the Jedi in '83 to 16 years later, we're getting back in '99, getting a new Star Wars film, and a lot of fans that we all had sort of expectations of this is how it's got to go down, and it went in a bit of a not different way, but just sort of wasn't what we expected. And for me, with my take on the prequels is I sort of like bits and pieces from them. I think for me overall, the storytelling, I think the story was good to an extent, but I think it just wasn't executed as well as it could have been. The thing that was so fascinating, with the Star Wars prequels was sort of the whole Palpatine's sort of rise to become Emperor. That's also, I find that really interesting, and the manipulation that all these things that he went through to pretty much become Emperor of of the Star Wars universe. But yeah, it is a concern, as we're sort of getting into an era. There's so many sequels and prequels and all these films that have been coming out, and I think it's going to be really interesting what Age of Resistance is going to be like. So and I guess that was the other thing about with with the voice cast. Reading through the voice cast, I was actually pretty surprised at some of the voices. Like Andy Samberg. It's like I never imagined. I can imagine him voicing a Skeksis, but it's like, and I think for me, I would have loved to have had voice actors. I would have loved to see like a Billy West or some of the many great voice artists from all other animation shows being a part of the Dark Crystal. Not to say that I'm it's not a bad thing. I'm really think that Netflix and the Jim Henson Company, they sort of certainly hope that they know what they're doing, and I'm sure that they are. But I guess I totally understand just sort of the concerns that we can have, and it's fine to have those concerns. It's not like there's no right or wrong in that aspect.
I think having concerns is a natural, healthy thing, probably. And I think we should always be excited, but also be ready to question some things. And I'm from what I'm seeing, here we are talking, and I'm sitting in front of my 27-inch iMac, and Deet is staring right at me, or I'm staring right at her. And I'm just looking at her costume and how beautiful it is, and how reminiscent of Kira's costume it is, and layered and amazing. But I'm also, because the Dark Crystal is like a child of mine. It's this that kind of lives in my heart. It's like this little flame. It's just always there. I've just finished a art doll of the Chamberlain, Skexel, I think. That's how alive this world is for me. And there is this back of the, kind of in the back of my head or in the back of my mind, just a little bit of concern that some of these people, some of these writers and the director aren't going to be able to help themselves, and we're going to have these wink, or we might have maybe there's going to be a goth Gelfling kind of being dark and moody, like something that's going to because they can't help themselves to write a character like that. It's really difficult for writers to stay in universe and not wink to us. And you can I believe that you can really tell a story and have it speak to your audience living in 2019 like world culture, but have the story contained in its own culture. But the themes are speaking to us, whether that's the hero's journey or the struggles of life, all of those things. Like I think Avatar, James Cameron with Avatar, even though a lot of people might not like it, of course, it's the biggest film of all time, at least all around the world. And he really retained the culture of the Na'vi in the film without winking to modern culture. He really did it successfully. So you don't ever feel like you're pulled out of that world. It feels completely foreign, completely otherworld-like, even though there are it feels kind of native, like native tribes or whatever. You can tell a story and have it relate to modern culture without, having to be heavy-handed in the way that you write things. And I know you and I were talking, this was a few months back, maybe even 8 months ago, and you were talking about how simple the Gelflings spoke, kind of the simpleness of their dialogue or their dialect or their vocabulary. And I think that that's really important. And I think that it makes them more relatable. It makes them a little bit more childlike, but it also makes them...
Yeah, and of course, we're going to hear Gelflings that are gonna, they're not going to be just have them voice, have them sounding all the same like as Kira and Jen. I think we're going to get different, kind of voices and dialects with that. Especially with Gelflings that are sort of older, adult Gelflings and child Gelflings and teenager Gelflings, they're all going to have different voices. So, I mean, that's the thing I'm really fascinated, like, how the Gelfling clans are going to sound like, is each clan going to have their own sort of dialect because they're, from their own clan and, or are they all going to sound the same sort of thing? It's going to be really interesting, indeed. And I think that was one of the things. I think there was an interview with Javier, who is one of the sort of the head writers on
Javier.
Yeah, Javier. Yeah, who was one of the head writers on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and he pretty much said I think it was an interview, I think at San Diego Comic-Con of 2017.
Part of what happens on an ongoing series, if you're working with human actors instead of puppets, is that there's a kind of implicit and sometimes explicit dialogue between the writers and the actors, where you begin to see, that this actor is good at this. We can write to that as a skill set. Obviously, you don't have as much of that if you're working with puppets as a cast. How does the relationship between the writers and the material as it unfolds when you're filming change?
Well, the nice thing is, Lisa Henson has been involved in this world since her childhood, in addition to being a formidable studio executive on her own right. So between her and her team, who are executive producers on the show and who are, as I said, very involved, one of the things that we're constantly being reminded of as writers, and it's, I wouldn't call it attention, but it's a constant dialogue, is what can and can't puppets do, And to our eyes, we are...
The girl puppets can fly.
The girl puppets can fly, the boys cannot. But we're very, very cognizant of that we're not writing for people. So, one of Lisa Henson's biggest contributions in the room and outside of it in terms of the writing is she's constantly reminding us the Gelfling and the Skeksis and all the other characters are not human. So we have to make a relatable show, but a show that really honors the alienness of this world, which is a huge writing challenge. And then also, for example, one of our scripts, we had a stage direction that somebody blanches, and we had a 20-minute discussion of how does a puppet blanch. So just as a writer, you begin to realize, okay, we need to write in discrete gestures that the puppeteers can look at and say, okay, here's what I'm doing with the puppet, So when they get with the puppet captain, because, you have like 3 performers per creature. You have a puppet captain, and then you've got the director, and our director is a phenomenal one. It's Louis Leterrier, who directed The Transporter and directed Now You See Me. I mean, this guy's a big shot. Between him and then there's going to be a puppet captain, and they all have to kind of watch what the puppets are doing and all that. So our job has become to make sure that we are writing relatable emotions for non-human characters, And it's not that their range of expression is limited, because the Creature Shop can do anything. I mean, they are incredible. But it's to make sure that our instructions to them are on puppet terms and not on human terms. So, I mean, it's, for me, coming off of something like The 100 or even Lost or whatever, it's a huge challenge, because the Henson Company is literally teaching us as writers how to write for puppets. You know, now they have like 9 shows in their kid space with puppets and all that. So it's not like they're bringing back. They've been improving their art for years and for decades. But with the Dark Crystal, it's something so special and so rarefied. You know, that we're taking all of that, all of the improvements that they've done by having all of these shows, and now we have to figure out how to make them work in this 10-hour narrative space.
That, you know, it is sort of hard to sort of try and write dialogue for the Gelflings in a way, because, you know, they're not from Earth. You know, they're not human-like characters. They're characters, you know, they're in this fantasy fictional world that's very different to Earth. You know, it's nothing like Earth, that sort of thing. And I think, you know, they probably would have had some challenges now and then to sort of, you know, work out, you know, with the writing process of the show, with some of the characters, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think that's probably good. It's good to hear that it's challenging for them, because it means that they're making the right decisions. You know, even the Skeksis didn't have this very articulate. Not that they weren't articulate, but they don't have this vocabulary. They live in a different world. They're going to have a different vocabulary. If anything, they're speaking English so that we can understand it. You know. And
that was the thing with the making of the Dark Crystal, was that the Skeksis were actually going to talk in their own language, and that it was just going to be their body language, and just they would just hope that them speaking their own language and that audiences would understand what they're sort of talking about, I guess. But with test screenings, it didn't work. So what happened was they had to get the writer to write new dialogue, English dialogue for the Skeksis based on the lip syncing movements of their mouths. So it's like, that's why the Skeksis dialogue is a little bit, weird in that regard, because they weren't talking in English in the first place. And I think, that's the thing with the TV show, is that, well, they know that they speak in English now, so they won't have any problems doing that with the show. So it'd be interesting to see what the Skeksis are going to, how they're going to talk, whether they're going to talk more intelligently, or, they'll be,
or more articulated.
Or more articulated, yeah.
Also the Mystics as well, how are they going to sound? When the master was, Jen's master, I can't remember his name right now, was speaking to him, it also wasn't in a lot of detail, but again, like you said, they had to change the dialogue. They had to kind of write dialogue to match the mouth movements. So that was tricky. But they also, even though they did that for the original, it is what it is. Whether they had to change the dialogue or not, they have to match that up. They have to match up the tone of Age of Resistance to make it feel like and sound like different characters are speaking. Of course, this is a different world we're joining into. We're kind of being thrown into. There's Gelfling all over the place. It's just a very different culture at this time. Whereas when we meet the world of Thra in the Dark Crystal, everything's kind of on the way out. It's being extinct. It's the Gelfling are gone. There's ruins. There's not very much to kind of deal with. There's the Podlings, but even the Podlings are kind of a dying culture, But the last thing not the last thing, but the other big question I had was, and I don't know if you and I have discussed this, but the idea, I saw this in relationship to the Alien series, where there was an article that I actually didn't read. I just saw the title. It said, "Stop answering questions no one's asking," and that's another prequel dilemma, where every question is answered. And so then by the end of the series, the films or the shows or whatever, there's no more questions because you've answered them all. And I think it's important for Age of Resistance maybe to answer a few things and to kind of pull back the curtain on a few certain things, but also set up new myths, set up new, I don't know if it's a new prophecy or just a new way to kind of explore the world of Thra without feeling like, okay, hey, Fizgig comes from here. This is Fizgig's mom. This is Jen's great grandma Mira. Or I'm sorry, this is Kira's great grandma Mira. Like just stupid stuff like that. Like we don't need to know where everybody comes from. We don't need to know someone's great grandmother. And not to say that we don't ever need to know those things. It needs to work within the context as opposed to just kind of fan pleasing. Because I know I'm not really interested in Kira or Jen's grandmother or parents. I'm not interested in where Fizgig comes from. I mean, I do hear that there's a whole kind of tribe of Fizgigs, which I think will be cute. But I don't need to know that, Fizgig's lineage. And like, oh, this is great grand Fizgig, like I just don't need to know any of those things. And sometimes the prequel filmmakers and directors, they start like just pulling all the curtains up, and it's like, no, it's too much. Mystery is what makes great films. Mystery. Leave mystery intact. So.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. And I think, like, I mean, especially with this whole show with Age of Resistance, like, I definitely think that not, everything is going to get answered. I think, they're definitely going to leave things pretty open, if, say, for season 2, if it does happen, which, I mean, that'd be amazing if it does. But yeah, I think, like, based on what we've seen with Age of Resistance, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm very positive about the show, and I can't wait, for more information about the show. But yeah, I mean, but I totally understand the concerns that that we all have, and even I have a bit of concerns as well. I mean that's the thing. It's like, what if the show isn't going to be any good, when it comes out? Because I know, I know that has happened for yourself, and with your Alien podcast, with Prometheus, but also more so with Alien Covenant, that sort of didn't meet. No, I don't know, not meeting expectations, or like it just didn't, just wasn't as successful or as good as as it would have liked for it to be. Yeah.
Wasn't as satisfying, and it felt a little bit predictable.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there is so much, as, we're still going to get continuing developments with Age of Resistance as we continue to anticipate with the show. But I think it was a good conversation to sort of talk about these concerns, and and for me, and it's one of those things, like, if if you enjoy something that that you love, and if it gets to a point where you just hate it so much that you need to put your anger out there on the internet, that it's sort of like I think you need to have a break, in a way, and just take a step back and just enjoy it for what it is,
and also realize that everyone working on Age of Resistance wants this show to succeed. They want it to be amazing. They want it to light a fire in our hearts like the original did. They want it to be special. They want it to be revolutionary. I mean, the big kind of elephant in the room that we're not talking about, aside from it's a Dark Crystal prequel and all of these things and puppeteers, in terms of a show being made with only puppets, no human actors in it, I mean, this is unprecedented. It's unprecedented for the puppetry community, really. And how this is going to revolutionize and bring, attention back to practical effects in a way. And a lot of attention has been kind of turning towards practical effects, thanks to The Force Awakens and J.J. Abrams and other films that have been coming out. And even
I still remember, like, that first behind the scenes video for The Force Awakens.
It was amazing.
And you hear Mark Hamill is like real effects, real practical effects. It's like you could almost apply that to Dark Crystal Age of Resistance.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole show is one real practical effect. Now there is some, there's some speculation as to whether there'll be some CG elements or some digitization, or we don't really know. But I think I would just, as we wrap up this conversation, what's most important to me is to not judge something before you've seen it. Have I been guilty of that? Absolutely. Do I try to stay away from it? Absolutely. But I don't think that there's enough out there. And if you look at these puppets, again, I'm staring at Deet. If you look at the artistry of these puppets and how lovingly they're crafted and painted, and just the expression on Deet's face, she's alive. She is alive. And this is a puppet. There's not enough there. We have not seen anything to criticize it. And maybe there's some differences in some facial architectures or whatever. But if you'll lose me. You'll lose some respect for me if you judge something before you've seen it. And I think with all of the work going into Age of Resistance to bring this type of project to life on the scale that they're doing, they only have my respect for now. You know, I mean, certainly I have some concerns about the voice talent and maybe some dialogue choices or whatever. But for now, all of those are in the back of my head. I have kind of rolled the red carpet out for them. They have my utmost respect until they don't. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You know, we've seen very little so far. So I think like it's pretty a bit too early to sort of criticize it heavily. Like don't judge a book by its cover. I think one of those sayings. So it's like let's just wait till the show comes out and then really deep dive into what we love and what we don't love about it. And and that's the thing, like there might be things I may not like about the show, and I'm going to be fine with that. It's nothing's ever perfect in a way. I mean, as much as we want things to be as perfect as possible, I mean, in an ideal world, we would love that. But but it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And but I think, regardless, I mean, this year is just, going to be an incredible year. Like, regardless of how things, go into place, with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. But, right now I'm pretty positive about it. And, it's just going to be an incredible wait. And, going to be an incredible year for all things Dark Crystal,
And we are certain to at least know that a trailer is coming, whether it's next week or next month or 2 months from now. A trailer is on its way. And there's a great quote from the new Mary Poppins. She says in a song, "A cover is not a book, so open it up and take a look." And I think that's a great way to kind of approach Age of Resistance. And I'm not at all saying don't be critical. How dare you be critical? All I'm saying is, let's just give something a chance. It's like criticizing a baby that a woman is carrying in her womb. Like, oh, it's not gonna be any good at school. It's not gonna pass its grades. Like, it's not even born yet. Give it a chance, And I just want, there's so many people who have worked on this show, and people that I know, people that things that we've seen that other people haven't seen. A lot of the people who have worked on the show have said it was their most favorite movie ever, and the fact that they had the opportunity to work on the show was a dream come true. And just all of the stories, the personal stories that people have as they went into creating this magical world. And that's enough for me right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, we're going to hear so many stories. Like, once the show comes out, there'll be a lot of interview episodes chained to people who've worked on the show. So that's one aspect with the podcast. I'm very much excited. I'm really looking forward to the most. Not only with seeing the show and talking about the show, but also talking to the team behind the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be amazing.
And I think they'll probably wrap up for this episode of Trial by Stone. So, Jamie, just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks for having me on. I can't wait.
Hurry!
At last, the crystal calls. It is time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
So that's all the time I have for this episode of Trial by Stone. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. We're also on Twitter at darkcrystalpod and on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast. If you like the podcast and you think that others would love it too, then please spread the word about it. And if you can write a review on Apple Podcasts or even on Facebook, greatly appreciate it. And if you're actually watching this on video on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and hit the subscribe button, and then also hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos from Trial by Stone. Thank you all so much, and stay tuned for the next episode of Trial by Stone.